Greetings viewers and welcome back. As mentioned in my previous video, I'm going to be going over Greenstuff. For those of you that may be just tuning in and haven't seen my other videos, this is part of a series geared towards new Warhammer 40K players. So even though it is listed as advanced techniques, it's more so advanced techniques for the new modelers and players. So if you're expected to see some fancy sculpts or anything really spectacular, this probably isn't going to be the video for you, and hopefully that can save you a little bit of time letting you know that in advance. For those of you that are watching this as part of the series that I've put together for you, you can see in front of you I have two different types of Greenstuff. The first one on the left is the putty type, and the one on the right is the newer liquid Greenstuff. I want to get into using the liquid Greenstuff a little more so hands-on. The one on the left, I don't really have anything to use it for, and I'm not really going to just waste it rolling it around when I can kind of explain, and it's pretty simple to use. If you've ever used Play-Doh as a kid, you can probably play with Greenstuff. Like I mentioned, kind of with the disclaimer, there are people out there that are very talented in using this stuff. They're very good sculptors, and they can turn those little yellow and blue blocks of putty into amazing little models and features and pieces and arms and weapons or whatever it is that their heart desires. And you could probably do a Google search and find some pretty awesome stuff. But like I said, I definitely don't have that skill, and I'm very, very basic in using it. And I'm just going to kind of go over some of the things that I've used it for, and maybe perhaps some ideas of things that you can do with it. The putty type Greenstuff is rather simple to use. Obviously it's split into a blue and a yellow half. You just kind of cut off as much as you think you may need. Usually that ends up being a lot more than I actually end up needing, because I'm not a very good judge at eyeballing it. So a little bit usually goes a long way depending on what you're doing with it. Usually more so what I use this stuff for is for filling in gaps. And I've also used it to make kind of like little fleshy, gloppy bits on some of my models, and also intestines or little tentacly looking things, just because that's really easy for me to shape, and it's not really a lot of sculpting or creativity involved and skill in getting it to look like something fancy. So usually when I'm using this stuff, what I'll do is I don't generally do it near my workstation, because there's always little crumbly bits of plastic or resin or just kind of in general junk floating around on my desk. And this stuff is kind of like I mentioned, using Play-Doh or even silly putty. And if you start rolling this around in your workspace and you got a lot of plastic bits and stuff, it's going to end up getting stuck in there, and you're going to have that same texture when you go ahead and apply it to your models. And unless that's what you're looking for, probably not a good idea. So typically what I'll do is I'll probably go to my dining room table, and I'll actually get a piece of wax paper, and I'll put the shiny side up, and that'll be kind of my workspace for that, just to keep it off of the table so my wife doesn't get mad at me. You need to keep it wet when you're using it. When you start rolling those two pieces together, you're going to roll it till it turns into a green color. I'll show you what that'll look like in just a moment. And you want to just kind of make sure it's evenly green so all those parts are mixed in. And as you start rolling it in between your fingers, it's going to kind of get sticky and start getting harder and harder to roll. So you need to keep it wet. Usually what I do is I have one of these little dishes like you find for sauces at a restaurant. I don't know where my wife got this from, I don't want to know. I just fill it with water, and usually once I roll up all the green stuff, I just keep dipping my fingers, and I'll actually dip the little ball of green stuff into the little dish. And then once I break off the piece I know I'm going to need, I'll actually leave the rest of it inside the little bowl while it's full of water while I'm messing with the other parts. So if I need to grab some more, I can just pull it out of there, and I don't have to worry about it drying and sticking to the wax paper that I have down and making a little bit more of a mess or making it more difficult to manipulate. So you make sure you definitely want to keep it wet. I believe I showed this to you in one of the other videos. I may or may not have. It's a little sculpting tool you can buy at any of the craft stores, usually used for clay. It has kind of like a little pointy, not necessarily sharp, but it's kind of got a little beveled edge on there so you can cut through the putty, so you can cut off the chunk that you need. And then you can use this little scoopy end thing here to kind of press it into the areas that you need it. And you may want to dip your tool in the water every now and again too to keep it moist so the green stuff doesn't stick to this. So if you're pushing it down in a crack or something and you go to lift it up, you're not peeling it right back out of where you stuck it into. So make sure you have your stuff plenty wet. Don't worry about over watering it or over wetting it. Like I said, I usually let it soak in that little dish until I'm ready to use it, just so that it doesn't dry out, because once this stuff dries, it gets about as hard as that plastic, and you're not really going to be able to move it if it's not where you want it. So make sure you keep it plenty wet, and then as long as you let it sit and dry for probably at least a couple hours, even if you wait 24 hours, it should be pretty well as hard as it's going to get, and then you can kind of move on from there if you're drilling into it or working around it or painting over it. So make sure you give it plenty of time to dry if you've extra soaked it, and again, keep it wet while you're working with it. So I'm going to show you kind of some of the things that I've done with the putty type green stuff. I recently just got the liquid green stuff and started using it, and it's actually pretty cool. Like I said, you can't really sculpt with it or do some of these things I'm going to show you as far as making like these little intestine looking bits here. Let me get some better light. This is one of my Nurgle themed army berserkers. As you can see, the little pink intestines coming out of him is actually green stuff. I just punched a hole through the chest piece before I glued it together, rolled up some green stuff, and then just kind of rolled it out so that it was a long cylindrical type shape, and then just twisted it to look like intestines poking out of his guts. Nothing really fancy, nice little basic effect. Like I said, it's nothing fancy. I'm not a good sculptor or anything, so sorry I don't have any impressive work to show you. Usually what else would I use it for is to fill in gaps, or again with my Nurgle themed army. The green stuff is really easy to use as kind of like a fleshy, gloppy texture type stuff, I guess. Using the little clay tool, you just kind of press it on where you need it, and then just use this to pull it apart and make it look kind of yucky, as you can see there on that. And there's several other spots I just kind of jammed it in there where I thought it would be appropriate. This is my defiler. I think I showed you this in the magnetization video. Still haven't painted it yet. Probably be quite a while before I do that. Just wanted to make it look kind of, like I said, nurgly and fleshy, gloppy. As you can see, the little 3-dot Nurgle symbol there, I just kind of pressed into it. And then you can see this little tentacly looking bit. Just had a bunch of extra green stuff. I didn't really know where to stick it, so I just kind of made it a tentacle. Same situation as the intestines. You just roll it out and it looks tentacly, if that's actually a word. Another one here, and then like I said, I just got some fleshy, gloppy bits all over the rest of it. Very simple, very basic technique, especially if you're new, if you're playing a Nurgle themed army. Good idea for you. I'm not sure that would be quite appropriate for other such armies as Tau or anything else, where they're kind of neat and nice looking. They don't have all these gloppy, gross looking bits falling off of them. So I don't really know what to tell you for that. Like I said, if you're looking for sculpting or any other advice, you may want to find some other videos, because I'm certainly not the person to show you that. So that's pretty much all I've ever used the putty type green stuff for. I've used it for filling in gaps, such as on the metal models or some of the fine cast ones. I'll show you my one of my venom thropes here with the fine cast. The little spore chimneys on the back here, when you put these two pieces in there, there's actually big gaps around, as you can see in the center here. There's quite a few gaps, and granted the shell's going to get painted black, so it may blend in, and once I put the primer on there, it should be okay. But if the gap is too big, obviously the paint's not going to cover it, it's just going to sink in there, so I want to kind of cover that up. So that's what I'm going to use the liquid green stuff for on this model. Also on the base here, the only thing that's really holding this model on there is there's a little stump that kind of sticks off of the bottom of the tail there that I drilled through the base and kind of punched it through there, but that's not very sturdy as far as holding it on there. It's a lot better than the zoanthropes, but it still kind of makes me a little bit nervous. If something bumps this hard enough, it's going to tear that off of there. If I drop it, there's a chance that it could pop off, so I'm going to slap some liquid green stuff around the base here just to kind of give it a little bit of extra structure, and then I'll probably glue a bunch of rocks or big old chunks of stuff around it just to kind of give it a little bit of environmental look to the base, but at the same time it's going to provide a little bit of structure to the actual model itself. So you're not here to see my venom thrope videos about the liquid green stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and move the camera and set it up so that I can show you what I'm doing as I apply the liquid green stuff, and you can kind of see what it looks like and the consistency and all that. So give me just a second and I'll be right back. Alright, so we're back again. Mr. Venom Thrope's all set up here. I've got my liquid green stuff. Just one thing to keep in mind, same thing as when I explained doing basing to you. I would recommend using the same brush just for the application of using the liquid green stuff for whatever it is you're using it for. And depending on your application, you're probably going to want either a bigger or more finer tip brush. All I'm going to be using it for is for filling in those cracks that I've shown you. And because this model is kind of yucky and gloppy on his own already, he's got little sacs all over him and veins and stuff, it doesn't really matter if I'm precise and only filling in the cracks, and it actually probably would add a little extra character if I end up slopping it over the edges a little bit. And then same thing down here on the base. What I'm going to end up doing after, like I said, I'm going to put the rocks on there. It's going to cover that up, so even if it's not fancy looking, it's not really going to end up mattering in the end. Depending on your application though, if you're only filling in a crack and you don't want it anywhere else, I would recommend using a finer tip brush. You could even potentially use the tip of a toothpick. This stuff's very easy to work with. You can actually adjust the consistency of it. To start with, right out of the bottle here, I'll give you a little shot of what it kind of looks like. The best way that I can describe it to you is actually more so the consistency of toothpaste. It's not really thick and gloppy, but it's also not really runny. It's still easy enough to move around. It's really like thick paint, or again, toothpaste is probably the best explanation I can give you for that. Like I said, if you need a fine tip, you can just use the tip of a toothpick and just kind of dot it into the areas that you're using it for. Again, because of the nature of what I'm using it for on this model, I don't have to really be precise, so that kind of ends up working out for me in the end. So I'm going to set this guy back up here, and I'm going to go ahead and start applying the green stuff to the areas I mentioned. So I just dip it right out of the bottle. If you are watering it down, unless you know you're going to want it that same watery consistency all the time, you can add the water to the bottle, or what I would recommend doing is using a, like I said, a toothpick and one of those little fine cast container box pieces, and just kind of glob in a bunch there and then add your water to it, swirl it around, and then dip out of that. That way you're not messing up your main supply of the green stuff in case in the future you need it for something else. So I'm just dipping it straight out of the stuff that's globbed into the lid there, and then just applying it around the base here again, just to give it a little bit of extra structure. And it doesn't really matter if I'm only touching the areas in between the model and the base. If I slop it on its tail, that's fine, just because again I want to give it that extra strength, and it's going to end up getting covered after I put all this stuff on there. I'll probably glue on some big rock or slate chunks around it just to help hold them a little better, because I really don't want this thing to fall off the base, because that'll be kind of a hassle to deal with later on down the road once the model's painted, based, and being played on a table somewhere. I've also got a, I'm not sure if you're able to see that or not. Zoom out a little bit. There's a paper clip right here that I drilled straight through the tail into the base, kind of at an angle, just to give it that initial bit of support. So I'm just going to kind of slop some green stuff over that just to cover up the part of the toothpick that's sticking through, and then smooth it out to try and give it a nice even layer on the outside there, so when I go to paint it, it doesn't look off like there's just a big glob of stuff right where that paper clip was, which is the reason for covering it up to begin with. So, and just glob some more on my brush there, and then just kind of start covering the areas that I'm trying to cover that crack for. And depending again on the size of the area you maybe want to cover, if it's just a small air bubble in one of your fine cast models, you probably want to water this down a little bit so it flows in there easier. Because I'm trying to cover up a crack, I actually want it thicker so that it stretches from one side to the other rather than just sinking down in the hole. And we just kind of keep going along the whole edges there, and I just keep covering up all the spots that I want to cover up. Again, this is going to get painted black, but I want the paint to cover the crack there and perhaps make it either look like it's not even there, or if it kind of blends into the little toxic venom sac things he's got on him, it won't really be all that noticeable as something that's different. Turn it that way a little bit. Stuff again is very easy to work with. It's just like using really thick paint, so the brush works nicely to work it into those areas. And because it is still water soluble when I'm done, I can just rinse off my brush as though I just finished painting, and it'll actually clean it up pretty nicely. Same reason you can water it down before you want, if you need to, before you use it. Cover up my last area here. Again, not a whole lot of precision required for this particular application. I'm just slapping it on there where I need to cover up the gaps. So there you have it. He's got the green stuff around the tail / base area. He's got all the gaps filled on his armor chinks there where the spore chimneys are coming out of his back. This color green stuff is actually a lot darker when it starts drying than the putty type. I've got one other venom thrope that I've already done this to, just as kind of my trial run before I did this one on camera. As you can see, it's very, very dark color, so you know when it dries is the darker it gets, basically. And all those little gaps on this one are covered in a similar fashion. I just kind of rubbed it around there, just like paint. Same thing you just saw me do with the other one. Once it dries again, it comes as hard as the plastic, and you can mess with it as far as you need to. If you got to drill into it, or if you want to cut some pieces off because maybe you went a little too far or it didn't come out as good as maybe you hope the next day when you take a look at it after it's dried. You can still manipulate it, but you're going to have to break it apart as though, again, it's plastic or the resin that you're messing with. So, again, I apologize if I confused anybody by the advanced techniques tag on the top of the video. This hopefully was helpful to some of the beginning sculptors and players out there that may be deciding to get into using green stuff. So hopefully you found this useful. I know, again, it was very basic. I apologize. I have limited skill with green stuff. When I get into the advanced painting techniques, doing some of the other stuff I'm going to get into, it should be a little bit more helpful, hopefully, than this. Worst thing you probably got out of this was kind of look at the liquid green stuff if you weren't sure about it, or you haven't either heard about it or you haven't been able to get your hands on some to know what it's like. Hopefully this helped you out a little bit. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please let me know. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful at all, please like the video, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.